Hello, welcome to the Self Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start chapter 5, Doing Sociology Research Methods. And our topic is Field Work in Social Anthropology. Fieldwork as a rigorous scientific method played a major role in establishing anthropology as a social science. The early anthropologists were amateur enthusiasts interested in exotic primitive cultures. They were armchair scholars who collected and organized information about distant communities which they had never themselves visited. Available from the reports and descriptions written by the travelers, missionaries, colonial administrators, soldiers, and other men on the spot. For example, James Fraser's famous book The Golden Bog, which inspired many early anthropologists, was based entirely on the such second-hand accounts, as was the work of Emile Durkheim on primitive religion. Towards the end of the 19th and in the first decade of the 20th century, many early anthropologists, some of whom were natural scientists by profession, began to carry out systematic surveys and first-hand observation of tribal languages, customs, rituals, and beliefs. Reliance on the second-hand accounts began to be thought of as unscholarly, and the good results obtained from first-hand work helped cement this growing prejudice. Since the 1920s, participant observation or field work has been considered an integral part of the social anthropological training and the principal method through which knowledge is produced. Almost all of the influential scholars in the discipline have done such field work. In fact, many communities or geographical places have become famous in the discipline because of their association with classic instances of field work. What did the social anthropologist actually do when doing field work? Usually he or she began by doing a census of the community he or she was studying. This involved making a detailed list of all the people who lived in a community, including information such as their sex, age, group, and family. This could be accompanied by an attempt to map the physical layout of the village or settlement, including the location of houses and other socially relevant sites. One of the important techniques anthropologists use, especially in the beginning stage of their fieldwork, is to construct a genealogy of the community. This may be based on the information obtained in the census, but extends much further since it involves creating a family tree for individual members and extending the family tree as far back as possible. For example, the head of a particular household or family would be asked about his relatives, brothers, sisters, cousins in his or her own generation, then about his or her parents' generation, father, mother, their brothers and sisters, etc. Then about the grandparents and their brothers, sisters, and so on. This would be done for as many generations as the person could remember. The information obtained from one person would be cross-checked by asking other relatives the same questions, and after confirmation, a very detailed family tree could be drawn. This exercise helped the social anthropologist to understand the kinship system of community, what kinds of roles different relatives played in a person's life, and how these relations were maintained. A genealogy would help acquaint the anthropologist with the structure of the community, and in a practical sense would enable him or her to meet while with people and become familiar with the way of community lives. Building on this base, the anthropologist would constantly be learning the language of the community. He or she would also be observing life in the community and making detailed notes in which the significant aspect of community life would be described. Festivals, religious or other collective events, modes of earning a living, family relations, modes of child rearing. These are examples of the kinds of topics that anthropologists would be specially interested in. Learning about these institutions and practices requires the anthropologist to ask endless questions about things that are taken for granted by members of the community. This is the sense in which the anthropologist would be like a child, always asking why, what, and so on. In doing this, the anthropologist usually depends on one or two people for most of the information. Such people are called informants or principal informants. In the early days, the term native informant was also used. Informants act as the anthropologist teachers and are crucially important actors in the whole process of anthropological research. Equally important are the detailed field notes that the anthropologists keep during field work. These notes have to be written up every day without fail and can be supplemented by or take the form of a daily diary. Now let us wind up the session, and thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self learning podcast.